Welcome to the Red Ink Revival Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Norris. We're going to grow your leadership through neuroscience, psychology, and theology. Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 18 of the Red Ink Revival Leadership Podcast. My name is Patrick Norris, and our goal today is to help you lead with a whole heart, a healthy brain, and a soul on fire. I'm so glad you're with us. In today's conversation, you're going to hear several of my great pastor friends as they share what God is doing in their lives and leadership. They'll talk about what they're learning about, what has driven them, how they discovered wholeheartedness, and have spawned a new heart-level revival for ministry and the assignments on their lives. In full disclosure, they're all alumni of our Red Ink Revival Leadership Retreats. Their experiences with us have absolutely changed the trajectory of their lives. You're absolutely going to love today's episode. But first, I'm so glad to have you with us wherever you get podcasts or in the video version of YouTube. We drop new content every week, shooting for Thursdays of the month. If this podcast is adding value to your leadership in life, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to the podcast, like it, and comment in the reviews. It'd be a huge help to us, and it gives us positioning where podcasts are offered. Also, help us get the word out by sharing on your social media platforms. If you subscribe and comment at iTunes, it will make our show pop up in recommended shows. Please help us out with that. Let's go now to this week's episode, number 18, with a favorite group of my special pastor friends as we talk about embodying a leadership revival. Well, welcome guys to the Red Ink Revival Leadership Podcast. I am so excited to have all of you four with me today. I've got four pastors in the house who God is doing some really cool things in their lives, and I love the experience and the backstories of who they are. But before we get rolling, I'd like to first just say welcome, and secondly, if you all would, let's go around the horn and tell your name, where you live and pastor, and how long you have been leading churches. So I'll start with Aaron. Tell us those things and let us know who you are.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on today. I pastor in a little town called Wheeler, Texas. It's in the Panhandle, about 100 miles east of Amarillo. I've been here for 18 years, and just love the small town life. Awesome.
John, you're next.
Hey, this is John Hutton. We live in Jacksonville, Illinois, and we've had our church, Go Church, we planted 8 years ago. We started in ministry in 2000, so we're 20 years into this now, and just catching our footing and just loving God and loving people.
Awesome. Steve?
I am Steve Wallace. I pastor in Jacksonville, Florida, and have been here and pastoring for almost 20 years as well. The name of the church is Family Life Church, and it's a great group of people. We love what we do, and so excited to be here today with you guys to share my story.
Awesome. Tony, how about you?
I'm Tony Dunn. I live in Corona, California. We're about 50 miles east of Los Angeles, and I pastor New Day Christian Fellowship, and we're 10 years old. Been pastoring for 10 years.
So good. So good. Well, guys, let's talk a little bit about your backstory. What got you into ministry? Why is this something that you thought, man, I really want to do that? We'll cycle back to you, Aaron.
I just sort of found ministry by accident. I grew up with a disability and had lots of physical limitations. I met a pastor when I was about 12 years old, and he and I formed a relationship, and I just started kind of hanging out with him and found ministry kind of by accident. After he introduced me to Jesus, I just sort of rode his coattails for about 10 years and then moved into children's ministry and then youth ministry and then pastoring. But, just because I was able to find some help and healing and get ministered to in my brokenness, it just naturally, I wanted to give that back and try to bring healing to others and be a blessing to others because of the example that Pastor Frank Gordoa set for me. So that's how I got started. It's just at a place of brokenness, a place of didn't know which way to go as a teenager, thank God, a man stopped and loved me and brought me to Jesus.
So good, man. John, how about you?
Yeah. Ministry just kind of found us, I guess, is when we got saved 20 plus years ago. I've always been in construction, owned construction businesses and done construction work. And anytime we'd have a prophetic minister come through town, they'd pull me and my wife out and say, God's called you guys to build the church. And I always thought, well, yeah, we'll probably build some church buildings because we're do construction. And as that evolved over a course of about 6 or 7 years, just repeatedly, we went on a mission trip. And when we came home from the mission trip, we got in front of the church to share about the trip and just started preaching, and God just ran with it from there.
I love it. Love it. Love it. Steve, how about you?
It's weird. Kind of the same theme as the other guys. I kind of just fell back into ministry, so to speak. I had always been in business and volunteered in church, predominantly in the area of music. And one of the last churches that I was a part of, the pastor decided that he was called to the mission field and said that I'd be a great fit. I didn't know if I was a fit or just there was nobody else around to take it. But after about a year in transition, it started to feel like all of the things that a pastor would need to be able to shepherd people kind of fit all of my jack of all trade type personality characteristics and actually really my affections. So it was kind of through a series of events that I really found myself in ministry full time and still there today, even alongside of the secular things that I do as well. It is the primary passion of my heart. And I'm just thankful for the unusual journey that it took to get me into that position.
That's awesome, Steve. Tony, how about you?
Well, I grew up in the church. My dad was a pastor, so I was always in church, if you would, but I'd never thought about full-time ministry, never crossed my mind. And over the course of my life and my marriage, raising my children, of course, we would attend church and we moved from city to city. But John said something like John, I was on a missions trip when the Lord called me. And came back home, did a 2-year school of ministry program. And but then the thing for me, I was 40 years old, so I was getting kind of old getting into this. And then ended up coming on staff at my former church as the mission pastor. And then 10 years ago, my wife and I launched out. So really been at this about 14 years in terms of full-time ministry. And so my passion is global ministry, locally and globally. So it was really God's calling me. I never thought I would do this, man. I got to be honest. It never crossed my mind. So I can't, no. So I think God had to really I had to have a supernatural experience for him to get a hold of my heart, because I just never thought I would pastor a church. In fact, never crossed my mind.
I love it, man. Well, all of you guys are dear, close friends of mine. I'm just so honored that you guys are all on today. I want us to kind of just have a conversation, but each one of you are leaders of leaders. You can't be a pastor and not lead some leaders. So you have a lot of experience. As we've heard, you've had years of being behind the steering wheel. When you think of leading, what is a leader to you? What's it mean to lead?
I've always been a John Maxwell fan. And, I love what he says about leadership. It's just influence, nothing more, nothing less. And I understand that. And my greatest gift is leadership, but it's really just influencing people for the kingdom of God and helping them become all God created them to be, helping them increase in their fruitfulness to go from 30, 60 to 100, just helping them discover purpose. So leadership, that's what it is to me, just advancing God's kingdom. Yeah.
That's beautiful, man.
Yeah, I would agree with what Tony said. That's the exact word that I felt leadership is. It's influence. Whether it's small or large, your influence is something that impacts people's lives in ways that you probably don't even think.
I love how influence is such an easy and simple way to think about it. All of you guys have been immersed in discovering what has been driving you your whole life. In fact, many of us, all of us, have throughout our lives been driven, but we didn't know what we were driven by. And at Red Ink Revival, one of our major mantras, which each of you guys are aware of, is that driven leaders ought to know what they're driven by. We want to get into the why you do what you do. We again say you got to name it to tame it. You got to know it to grow it. You guys have been learning a lot about your inner world, and you've learned some things about you, life, ministry. Talk to that and just share the journey that you've been on to look into the deeper recesses of what's driving you.
I tell you, one of the things that the Red Ink Revival just really changed the trajectory of my life, and that I never really saw, like what you were saying, what I was driven by. And one of the things that has been so liberating and so freeing to me is to understand that, and one of my big driving forces is that I was afraid I was going to fail. And my dad was a driven person. He would drive me to try to overcome this physical disability, cerebral palsy. And so I have found myself in this cycle where you would go over and over and over again trying to reach this mantra of success, for one that's never been defined. So you'd never know if you got there anyway. And so one of the things that's been so liberating to me is that I'm already a success. Because of who I am, because of who God made me to be, because of what God says about me and my identity, and my success is determined based on my relationships, not my accomplishments. And so now I'm finding myself more driven by a love and a servanthood, whereas probably for the majority of ministry and life in general, marriage, every other relationship, I was driven by this need to succeed that will never be accomplished. Now I'm just driven by serving and loving and being in that identity that Jesus gave me, instead of trying to find an identity that I've never even defined and don't even know what success looks like anyway.
Yeah.
You know, so that's been so freeing for me, where I've just been able to get off of that hamster wheel and just live in who God's called me to be.
That's brilliant, man. Absolutely brilliant. John, how about you, man? What are you experiencing these days in ministry that's caused you to look to your inner world?
You know, one of the things, Patrick, that you've instilled in me is to be able to look back into our story and then really encourage ourselves and stop being so critical of ourselves, which is the easier thing to do. And one of the statements you've made to me, and probably to the other guys too, is if I was talking to someone in my shoes who had been through what I had been through, would I give them a little more grace? And that has shaped how I look with ever since the November when we did the first retreat. I came home and as I interact with people, I'm just like, I wonder what happened to them. I wonder what trauma they had, or I wonder what their environment was growing up, or so I've just really got that heartbeat inside of me to give people grace, and it's really kind of came out in my preaching now, just really telling people, let's show mercy, let's show grace to humankind in general, and let's show them a kinder version of the church, where God's calling out and pursuing people because he wants to bind up the brokenhearted instead of beat them over the head with a Bible and tell them how wrong things are in their life. So, I mean, it's radically changed me and my approach to life in general.
That's powerful, man. I mean, that's amazing. Steve, how about you? What's going on in your journey where you are learning about yourself, about life, about ministry from an inner world?
Well, it's interesting. I am so grateful for the Red Ink Revival and for you, Patrick, and what God's put in your heart for leaders, because I think we're all aware that we're naturally wired in some ways the way that we are for certain things. And being comfortable in that was something that I was never really proficient in. I was always comparing, and everybody knows comparison kills contentment. So I was never content, constantly chasing measures and metrics and things that would hopefully bring a sense of satisfaction and success, only to really find myself at the same place over and over again. But because of what you've been teaching us, what we've been learning, you realize that there's wiring and then there's wounding. There are certain things that have influenced my life and impacted my life, and I wasn't even aware of it. And so getting some information, some knowledge about who I am, based on the journey that I've been on in this life, and being able to give a voice to those things, to bring healing to those areas, and instruction really to those places in my life, has brought me to if I can put it this way, just a greater sense of freedom and satisfaction in who I am, in my natural wiring. So I guess I'm at a place now where there's actually some liberty and some freedom in some places that I've never had before. I just kind of masked them with certain things, or fed certain things with, eating, going to the movies, whatever it was. But now there's actually a freedom. There's a settling, if you will, in my life that that I've never known before. So I'm grateful for that.
Oh my gosh, I've gotten such joy out of just watching your story unfold. You're such a go-getter. You're such a hard worker. You're such a visionary. And one of the fallbacks that I think you are looking for in some of the words is you would hyper speed up. You would speed up and do a lot more. And the people around you would just admire the work ethic. They would admire that you're a get-it-done guy. And yet some of the things that were driving that behavior was that you inadvertently weren't slowing down to actually feel and see and experience what's happening. To watch that, and even to hear your heart right now, all of you guys, it's just such a thrill. You all became a part of my life through coming to a Red Ink Revival retreat, and now we're just all very good and close friends, but to be able to have somewhat of a front row seat in your story is just, it's one of the most beautiful gifts you've ever given me, and I love it. Tony, how about you? What are you learning about life, yourself, ministry that is internal, a part of who you are?
Well, God answers prayer. My wife and I, we really wanted to literally become all that we were created to be. And so we really began to work on ourselves, especially our inner selves. Luke 4:18 is really what speaks to me, the brokenhearted, a recovery of sight to the blind, getting my vision back, dreaming and hoping again, making sure I'm not held captive by anything. And Steve was just talking about that freedom. So that's what Jesus said, deliverance, liberty. Those are freedom words. Whom the Son has set free is free indeed. And so we'd done a great work. But last year, I was really seeking his face and saying, Lord, I know that there's still something hindering me. There's still, I know there's another, I need to get down to really what that is. And then earlier this year, I'm scrolling on Facebook and I see red ink. And I'm like, oh, Lord, there it is. There it is. And so jumped on board and became a part of what you guys have here, Patrick, and what you created. And it's really made a difference, finding those other things that were so deeply buried, man, things I committed to that were counterproductive or that competed against, I'm standing there saying, I want to do this. I want to become this. But there was these other things I was equally committed to that were keeping me stagnant. And so, my desire to go to that next level means I got to go within. And so that I can become. And so, yes, I'm driven, but I was also times I was in resistance. So, and that's double-mindedness. And so I had to get free. And that's why I'm so glad I connected with you guys. So it's been great working on me.
That is so beautiful, man. For real. I love it. When I think about leadership, I remember when I was in high school, I sensed my gifts were emerging. I had a big vision. The Word of God had become alive in me. And I knew I wanted to be a pastor, a preacher, a leader. And I had some really romantic ideas about leadership. Even when about 19 years ago, we started our church here in Kansas City, Life Point Church. Even then, I had all of these, kind of romantic ideas. And yet when you contrast that to many of the things that were really happening in life and leadership over these years, some of the things that I've experienced are not the same as what I anticipated. What was it that you originally were thinking about in ministry leadership, and how does that contrast, or what's different in what you actually are living out, and maybe hit the whys of that? Steve, I'm going to just jump to you.
A lot of what you just described. I mean, when you start, you obviously look for examples of success, quote unquote success, and those metrics and things that would kind of quantify success. You strive for those, you try to achieve those numbers, those things that at least give the appearance of success or movement or forward progress in ministry. The stuff that on the outside looks like it would be satisfying in the pursuit. But I guess where I am today and my outlook, really largely determined by what I've learned at Red Ink Revival, has been that there's something so much deeper than that. So much deeper. When you stop looking at crowds and you stop looking at numbers and you really start to focus on people, because you've been, as you've directed us to look at ourselves, you really realize that the ultimate success and the greatest fulfillment, for me, at least today, and in what you've taught us, is seeing people actually become healthy. People become well-rounded and whole and healthy because of what Jesus has done for them. I think for me, that's the epitome of success, and what God's called us to as shepherds and leaders is to look for and to leverage all of the influence that we have just to see wholeness in every person and in every pursuit that we endeavor.
That's amazing. John, how about you?
I guess my biggest thing going into ministry was probably naive and not thinking that what I'd seen outside of the church was inside the church too. And one of the famous quotes is, the church is the only army that shoots its own. So when you're first immersed into that, I don't know, for lack of better words, the ugly side sometimes of ministry, it catches you off guard. And you have to guard your heart through the whole process too, because as leaders, bitterness is something that we always constantly have to watch, because we're constantly in a realm where rejection and people are rejecting what we feel is us, when a lot of times it has nothing to do with us. It's totally on them. We've learned now through what you've taught us. But as pastors, we bear that rejection of why did they leave, or what did I do wrong, or what did I say wrong, or what could I have done to keep them here, and
Yes.
Finally letting go of that. And like Steve said, if we'd have realized 20 years ago we needed to fix ourselves first, a lot of this would have been a lot easier. But thank God that we're in it now. So.
It does seem like that when we enter to pain points in ministry, which you can't be in ministry and not experience pain, and every rejection that you have, every betrayal that you have, will surface in you things that are still fragile or broken, and unresolved and unprocessed griefs and losses from the past that have turned into what your personality is about today. I know for me, when I left, I was guest speaking for 13 years, did conferences, seminars, revivals, all these kind of, elongated type meetings in churches, and I did Bible colleges and other things. And at the point in which I began to pursue pastoring, I really had a deep passion to reach lost people that didn't have a relationship with Christ, but they're good people. And I knew that my particular group and people that we were around, we said that we loved the lost, but we did things that were counterproductive to actually reaching people. And we called it Holy Spirit, we called it anointing, we called it gifts of the Spirit. And certainly all of those things are valuable to me, but I did realize there is a biblical input where we can reach people without being crazy or being weird and lead them into deeper things of God. Well, when I did that, many of the people that I was closest to thought that I was compromising and that I had entered into heresy. At the same time, there was several of the network of pastors that I really was close to that had moral failings, big moral failings. I felt so isolated, and I enter into starting our church with good friends calling me a heretic simply because I wanted to reach lost people. And they didn't know that in private they're saying these things, and these things are getting back to me. Then I start our church, and within the first 2 years, there is a huge family of people. I'm talking a matriarch, patriarch, adult children who are married, who have kids, and they were integrated into the major roles of our church. And the next thing I know, there is this, I kept thinking if I just love people well, I can get them around any corner. And the naive nature of that, without thinking, people are going to need to be corrected. They're going to need to be directed. They're going to need to have some kind of plan put in front of them and be held accountable to it. And nonetheless, this began to fall apart. And I personalized it, which again goes all the way back to my childhood wounds. And this began to pulsate in me, and I ruminated. I felt like such a failure. I felt like that I had messed up so deeply. And, it took me years to reprocess so I could be wholehearted about that. Well, then the next person would come along that you thought, we're lifers. I'm going to marry your kids as they're little bitty and they grow up, and I'm going to be the one who officiates the wedding. I'm going to be sitting there crying. When we're in our 70s, we'll be on the back porch of some house overlooking a creek talking about the good old days. And then person after person after person left, and they, most of the time, left with no closure. You didn't know why. And it, for me, who fits in what's called an anxious attachment style, that just inflamed me and my sense of self. And so in ministry, we come in with these naive and sweet, romantic ideas, but reality sets in. And if you personalize it, it will move you into depression. And then you think, leadership is influence. So if I'm a good leader or an effective leader, I should be able to help people change their minds and influence them, sell them to my desire. And then you can't. And then you feel like, again, a failure. You look on social media and see everybody else's metrics and how great their life is. That's my story. And thankfully, the things that you guys are saying that I've been able to teach or lead or experience with you, those are things that I've experienced in my own heart and life. Thankfully, I was given some really good tools from some really good people that now are allowing me to share with others. What I'd like to do is take this idea of some pain and how you process through it. Would maybe, Aaron, would you like to speak to this? How have you gone into ministry and experienced real pain, but in the process of that, you've learned some tools that now then you are living wholehearted, even before where you would melt down or fire up or be passive aggressive? Tell a little bit about how what you're experiencing today has changed you.
Well, and I'll tell you, this goes right back to what I was saying before, talking about a trajectory change. Going into ministry, I was always kind of a second man, and to be honest, I'm still comfortable in that role. That's what I like, to be an associate, be under someone who's the head. And so when I stepped into pastoring, I just thought, hey, just if I love people like you were saying and be like Jesus, then everybody's going to love me back and everything's going to be fine. And when someone would come against that, or we would have some conflict, you would just be dead to me. I mean, I would just be completely done with you, completely isolate from you. And I was just really damaged on the inside from all of those conflicts, because if you didn't like me, it caused me to feel like I'm failing, I didn't achieve. And so you would just be completely dead. But one of the things that I learned at Red Ink Revival in working with people, and even right now, we're meeting in our town square on Sundays, doing special events, and a lady got on social media and just blew us up and said, you're only having this because you want to receive your offerings and this, that, and the other. Just really blew us up. And my first thought was not block that lady, ban that lady, throw her off. Our first thought was, man, I wonder what's going on in her brain right now.
Incredible.
The way that you explained it, when we first started getting together, and said, if you can step out of your emotions and look at it like you're sitting in an empty stadium looking at a football field. You talk about being in a Chiefs stadium, stepping out of it and saying, wow, why is that going on? And so instead of just exploding on that lady through social media and blocking her, but Sonia and I just grabbed hands, and we just prayed for her. Because I was able to step out of that emotion and say, golly, what is happening in her brain that's causing her to, here we are trying to get out here, love people, help people, bring people together in a time of quarantine, all this stuff. And she goes on the attack. And I see that as just how you've got cortisol spraying in this side of the it's all fired up. So it doesn't have anything to do with it. And so we were able to pray for that lady, whereas I would have been like, forget her, ban her, knock her off, we were able to respond with a love response and a mercy response instead of that defense mechanism that I had flowed in so many times in years past. And I distinctly remember thinking of you in Red Ink Revival because I was able to step into the Chiefs Stadium and be like, wow, that's really crazy that lady's having that experience based on what we're doing.
That is amazing. Tony, how about you, man?
Similar to Aaron, I would always lean on scriptures or instances in the Bible that suited me not connecting with people. I am task-oriented. I would be one to quickly kick the dust off my feet and move on to the next town, in terms of relationship with someone if it wasn't going the way I thought. In fact, my wife used to say that you're so dismissive, you're quick to dismiss people. And in an effort of sincere desire to be more Christ-like and compassionate, I knew I needed to work on my heart, still need to work on my heart. And so, I do want to, like that level of fruitfulness, that Jesus talked about in the parable of the sower, the 30, 60, and 100. How do I go from 30 to 60? How do I get better? How do I become more influential? How can I be more compassionate? And so I love the Chief Stadium example, John said it earlier about, stepping out and looking at people from a healthy perspective. The healthier I get, the clearer I see. And so that's really what's happening. I have to get healthy. And, I use the adage, like, you can't, if your leg is broken and you don't get it reset and let it heal, you'll never run again. You can hobble, but you can never run. And so same thing with your arm, you can never throw. Same thing with a broken heart. If it's not healed, you can't do life effectively.
Come on.
So it's a willingness to be vulnerable, and I love having the guys. These are my buddies, and a place where we can go and we can share and we can talk. And so taking the tools, the things that we're learning, and then implementing them is really moving things forward. And this is an amazing season, an amazing opportunity that we have right now to do that. And to work on ourselves so that we can grow and literally, become the best version of ourselves, become authentic. And I really want to finish my race. I really do. And I want to not just limp across the finish line. I want to finish strong. But it's kind of hard to do that outside of, you can't do that just by yourself. You have to have outside influence. You have to have people helping you with your blind spots. You have to have a place that you can go. And so that's really what Red Ink Revival has provided for me.
John, Steve, either one of you guys want to pop on and share your pain story and new tools that you've learned and how you're dealing with it today?
Yeah, sure. I'll go. I'm a little bit different than Aaron. If anyone ever came against me or said something negative or didn't approve of something that I did, I didn't write them off. I determined I was going to win their heart at all cost. I was going to get their affection. I was going to get their approval. They were going to think I was champion by the end of my interaction with them. And what I've come to realize is you will not have everybody like you. And after going through the Red Ink process that we've been through thus far, and really beginning to look inwardly as to why I needed everybody to like me, why I needed approval, and the approval of everyone to feel healthy and okay and successful and validated really was the big thing. Was painful at first, but has proven to be the most healthy gain in my life so far, because you have shown us how to look inward for those things that are triggers or those things that just kind of sleep there and then all of a sudden are awakened. And when they are awakened, now I have the ability to look inward and ask myself, why is it I need this person's approval? Why is there rejection of me such a big thing. And there may be positives and negatives to some of those things, but ultimately what you've caused me to do is to really look inward as to why certain things trigger me, and look for the healthy things and the unhealthy things, put them in their right place so that I can continue to move forward as a leader, a person, a husband, a father, in a healthy way.
John, go ahead and share yours.
Yeah, Aaron, I could go right down your story you were in. My family was famous. They took pride in being hard-headed. And I had a dad and an uncle who got in an argument. They literally lived in a town of 700 people, one house apart from each other, and they didn't speak for 25 years.
Oh my gosh.
And they were proud of it. So I came by that resentment level, I guess you'd say honest. I saw that in effect. But what Mandy and I have talked about now, we're so excited for what you guys have poured into us. And I know we'll never do it to your guys' level, but our excitement is, isn't it going to be awesome when God uses us to start helping other people?
Yeah.
Once we get further through this journey and we can take these tools, and now this person that we would write off, if we can sit down in an office and say, you know what, hey, what's really going on? And so we're just excited about making the next step from where we can pour this into other people, and with the intent of directing them into Reading theirself, but also those little seeds we can sow out of this. So, because I think God wants us to be fruitful in this too.
I want to invite you to one of our Red Ink Revival leadership retreats. Retreats are 40-hour plus intensive experiences led by psychotherapists, neuroscientists, and tenured pastors. These amazing intensives help pastors, staff, and marketplace leaders lead wholeheartedly in every sphere of life. Our retreats are profoundly helpful to you as you lead your organization. However, the most important person you will ever lead is you. Pastors and marketplace leaders struggle with the same emotional drivers. Statistics show that 70% of pastors struggle with depression and fear of inadequacy. 77% feel they do not have a good marriage. 90% are workaholics. 64% are engaged in secret activity around alcohol, drugs, and sexual behaviors. 84% wish they had a processed friendship that they could confide in, but grieve the fact that they don't have such a person. Today's leaders are painfully struggling with depression, isolation, anxiety, and panic attacks, and then powerlessly ruminating over what coulda, shoulda, woulda been. Then to right the ship, leaders tend to chase the illusion that a greater performance and a greater success will quiet the enemy in their souls. But performance, even if gained, measured, and celebrated, never quiets the soul. These ruminating emotional states gain momentum over days, months, and years, and give power to unmanageable behaviors like rage in marriage, avoidance as parents, or addictions like alcoholism, recreational drugs, pornography, or sexually acting out. For the spiritual leader, succumbing to one or more of these throws them into a firestorm of shame that ultimately keeps them in a cycle of bondage. Yet neurobiologically, we have learned that inordinate behavior is never about the ability to white-knuckle discipline through the temptation. The behavior is driven by emotional griefs, losses, and relationship injuries from our backstories. These emotional memories become embedded into our brain's neurocircuits. Until these memories are addressed and appropriately reprocessed, the struggler will continue to grow in the struggle until there comes the day of public discovery and painful disclosure. Red Ink Retreats provide hands-on experiences in concepts, techniques, and coaching derived from theology, brain research, and psychological modalities. Our goal is to improve your individual leadership satisfaction, releasing a freedom for an energized life and a surprising greater performance. Go to redinkrevival.com and click the Retreats tab. You'll be inspired by previous retreat attenders. You'll hear their stories, and then you can dream of what could happen if you attended a retreat yourself. It might bring exponentially more fruitfulness to your organization. It might save your ministry, your marriage, your kids, and maybe even your self-respect. What is the value of leading wholeheartedly? So what are you waiting for? Go and register for our next retreat. Thank you for letting me share our Red Ink Retreats dream.
Well, that is a big heart of what we are dreaming, is not just to bring you through your victory and freedom story, but actually to equip you all. I mean, the fact is, pastors are entrepreneurs. You're innovators. And when you see people in pain and you have a solution, your gifts are going to say, I can do that. I can step into that. And so what we want to do is equip pastors with a high level of efficiency. We want to create e-courses, and not just e-courses, but coaching, so that we can empower you to do the same thing and to scale. So I love the impact that it's having on each and every one of you guys, and the health that you guys are moving in. It's so beautiful to me. When I think about these statistics within the pastoral fraternity, you look at what leaders are struggling with. You've got people who are in high levels of anxiety. A lot of pastors are in panic attacks, self-esteem issues, depression, perfectionism, passive aggression, codependent leadership. Some are sexually acting out and nobody knows it. Lots of secrets. There's binge drinking and drunkenness and alcohol. There's illegal drug use and more. And again, they're secrets, so nobody really knows about it. And we all know that all of these behaviors are not about the behavior. All this acting out is really not about the acting out. I even heard a leader recently talk about that they are hiring performance coaches trying to get a higher level of efficiency because of panic attacks that they're experiencing. Now, I don't want to assume that I know any backstory on this, because I don't. But the first thought that hits me with our Red Ink paradigm and the modeling we use is that more efficiency and more fruitfulness is not going to satisfy a panic attack. A panic attack is about something much deeper. So today, when you think of all these struggles, what would you guys say to a pastor, a leader? What would you say to somebody who is struggling with one of or more of these particular inordinate emotional behaviors? Let's start with you, Tony. What's something that you would share today with somebody who is struggling?
Really identify that sycamore tree, and that's what Jesus said. What is that specific thing? And you got to get, the point is, you got to get to the root of it, and it has to be plucked up by the root. And that's going to take courage to really see what is really going on. You're right. And so being anxious and panic attacks and all these type things that are happening. But the other thing that keeps people there is this desire to appear a certain way in front of others, to not let anyone in. And so, you're equally committed to, I got to look good, or I can't let anyone know. But then this other stuff keeps manifesting. So you're going to have to, at some point, have the courage, have the faith to, because I hear a lot, the culture I came up in, church culture I came up in, was similar to yours, Patrick, where you didn't show weakness. We knew who we were in Christ, and we're strong. Now, I couple that because I grew up in the inner city, where you never show weakness. You never back down. And so then so then what happens is you hit the ceiling, you go to this level, and you'll never break past it unless you can really deal with the root of the issue. And that's what Jesus himself said. And we preach that, but we're not living that. So it's going to take courage. It's going to take courage. And so again, just having this network here, being a part of this group, and spending time with these guys, working with them, it's encouraging, us to go and look at it. And then not only once you identify it, it's going to take faith to walk away from it, because we've lived with it for so long. It's what we know, and we're so familiar. And even though it's painful, we're familiar. So it does take courage. So to have a group that's praying with you committed with you, that you can talk to. And then when you're hearing the similar stories, and I love it. Like a moment ago, Steve said his story is different from Aaron's. Aaron's motivation is, is a little similar to John's, and and so we can identify. But having others, I think that's where the power is too, because you're watching others, you can learn from them, you're hearing what they did. And so there's encouragement in that. Faith comes by hearing. So as I'm constantly hearing victory and willingness and fight, man, it stirs me up to want to move forward and to get better and to get healthier.
Steve, how about you?
I would say to any other minister or leader out there, first and foremost, you are human. You are no different in most ways than the people that you speak into their lives. And you are susceptible to the same challenges and struggles that every single person you face every week struggles with. And the worst thing you can do is hide. The worst thing you can do is shelter in place, if I can borrow the terminology today, in your pain or your hurt or the dysfunction or that deadly cycle that you might be living through. The most courageous thing you can do as a leader is to get your head up out of the sand and ask for help, to look for help, like Tony talked about. Just realizing you need someone else to speak into your life, and not just about coaching for numbers and success, but for wholeness. Yeah. And Red Ink is a safe place. It is a place where your anonymity, your security, your story, your life is safe, and you need to discover why you are wired the way that you're wired and why you think and move the way that you do, so as to come to wholeness. I mean, after all, it's what we as spiritual leaders, we preach it to everybody every single week: wholeness, spirit, soul, and body. But yet oftentimes we'll allow deficiency and sickness or hurt and pain to isolate us in places that aren't healthy. And I think the longer you stay there, the greater the implosion. And then when people discover that you are human, it just it can be devastating. And it doesn't have to be. That's just the thing. And God put something in your heart that's making it possible for leaders to discover a wholeness probably like they've never known before.
I love that neither one of you, Tony or Steve, neither one of you said, just stop it, pray more, read your Bible more. Neither one of you are attacking them as sinners and, you reprobate people. Right. You guys both spoke with such compassion, as though there is a cause, there is circuitry, there is something physiological, something neurobiological that is actually driving it. And I think this is where it gets so interesting when we listen to the Best Leadership podcast, when we read the best leadership books, when we go to the leadership conferences, we hire consultants for church life, and we hear about so many platitudes of how to, their tactical movements, and yet we never stop to ask, why is it that I struggle to execute on the thing I know to do? How, even in a leadership, organizational sense, not even in a moral sense or a quote unquote sinful sense, but just leading organizations. Why do I procrastinate? Why do I forget meetings? Why am I not excited and bringing energy to a team? Because I'm reading in the podcast or the books, I'm hearing in the podcast that the first thing I've got to do to influence a group in leadership is to bring positive energy. Well, the question is, why do I go into the meeting and I'm kind of ticked off before I even start the meeting, and I'm ready to tell everybody what they're doing wrong and we got to do better and we're just critical? Why is it that we are experiencing all of that?
Hey,
yeah, Steve.
Let me add something to what you said, because I personally have walked through exactly what you're talking about. Years ago, I took our staff, at that time was probably about 12, 14 full-time people, to a leadership retreat, packed everybody in cars, drove up to a man who had actually worked in the secular arena for a company that actually had took over Victoria's Secret. And when they did that, it compromised his values, and he left tons of money on the table. And he's created leadership instruction for churches predominantly. Well, I took all my people, every single one of us up there. We got the books, we got the tapes, we got the monthly mail outs, and I don't care what we did, we could not seem to integrate what the guy was giving us in a positive way. Actually, I lost half my staff after that leadership retreat.
Oh my goodness.
After investing all those thousands of dollars, the lodging, the travel, the information, the books, I lost half the group. And today I look back and I realize that started with me. We were trying to integrate all the information like you talk about from podcasts, leadership materials, books. You're trying to integrate that into people that aren't whole and healthy. I was trying to bring all of this information and somehow overlay it onto lives that weren't prepared to receive it. Mm-hmm. They weren't prepared to integrate that into who they were because they didn't know who they were. They didn't know how they were wired. They didn't know why their triggers were what they were, why our staff meetings had contention and strife around holding people responsible for activities and timelines and things. And what I was trying to do was fight that on the surface, just go at the behavior, go at the willful intolerance and indignation and indifference and just say, come on, people, get on board with the vision.
Yeah.
We were serving the vision rather than figuring out why we could not integrate as a staff around what the vision was. And so what I think you're talking about here and what we've all begun to learn is it's so much deeper than just a bunch of principles. It's going into the very heart of the people. And when you can get to the heart of the people and why they're wired the way they are, everything about those principles and dynamics now finds a soft and fertile soil to seed and to grow in. And so that's what's happening for me. And actually, I'm thrilled. I know I'm getting outside the question. I'm thinking about the next season that I feel I have as a pastor, because to be honest with you, I'm a little vulnerable. I went through a season in a shift that took us out of a physical building to a portable location at the moment. And I thought, well, that's it. I had my shot. I had my chance. I had my opportunity at the ring, and it's gone. So we'll maintain this until it just kind of filters and fizzles out, and say to God be the glory. And instead now I truly feel like opportunities are presenting themselves. And now the preparation of my heart is going to meet with those opportunities, and the people God puts in my pathway and that I go and bring in. We're going to be able to go at this thing, I think, infinitely more prepared and more successful for the right reason and the right purposes because of having discovered what was the wrong approach now with what is the right approach, at least in what I believe.
That is amazing. I think you just get your mic and just throw that thing down right now. Just throw the mic down. That was awesome. That was so good. Well, John, how about you, man? How important is it to you today that leaders make this a priority to know what's firing it up, shutting down, and looking at the emotional drivers behind why they're doing? Again, we're putting this in contrast with the podcasts, the books, all this tactical how-to that often we're incapable of executing, or our team members are, without ever addressing what's the engine that's driving this.
I think we all have always had this desire in our heart that we should be doing things different. And so we'd use this language, well, what you need is an accountability partner. And I shared with you guys, the only thing that we were counting on was that you wouldn't ask my secrets and I won't ask yours.
Right.
And then it would always revolve around this conversation that you need to renew your mind. You need to take every thought captive, and God needs to create a new heart in you. Well, those are three huge, huge things that we don't have the tools to even tackle, but we needed to put some kind of language to it. And then we wonder why we keep spinning our wheels and don't ever move forward. And then we encountered you guys, and you guys peeled back that layer. And now we can look at each one of those areas where I need to be renewed in my mind. Well, now I have to first understand how my mind is broken before I can understand how it can be fixed. Yeah. And I need to take every thought captive. Well, what's driving my thoughts? Why am I thinking this? Well, I need God to create in me a new heart well, maybe God wants to restore and fix the heart that's in me.
That's good.
And so now we have what I feel like, I guess, to put it in an analogy from a hillbilly in central Illinois, we've been walking around all this time with a gun with no ammo. And we thought of just point the gun at somebody and say, hey, you need to fix yourself. Then we would say, okay, then fix yourself. And now it's like we have the ammo. And we realize now we've got some tools, and it's not snap my fingers and I'm okay. It's a journey of starting to capture. Now, people our age, I've got 51 years of going down this trail. And I once preached a sermon from when I was a kid. I worked for a farmer, and all winter long they would drive the same path from their house down to the cattle lot. And by the time spring got there, these ruts would be literally 18 inches deep, and you couldn't take the road unless you drove in the ruts. It was impossible to miss the ruts. And I've used that analogy that's most of our lives. We're in the ruts. We want to get out of the ruts, but we've developed a road and a pathway that the only way to get to where we're going is to stay in the ruts. And now you guys have come along and you've said, you know what, here's a bulldozer. Why don't we smooth out the ruts first, and then we'll start talking about a different path. So
that's awesome, man. That's awesome. Aaron, when we do the podcast, when we do the leadership conferences, we hire the consultants, we pray more, we read the Bible more, we do everything that we think we need to do to grow our ministry. And when it's not being effective, it tends to create futility in us. That's why 70% of pastors report an ongoing battle with depression and a lower sense of self-esteem than when they had first started in ministry. So for you, what would you coach somebody who has hit the whole futility threshold? How are you going to talk to them about their sense of, I tried everything and it doesn't matter what I do. What I do doesn't matter because it's not going to create any results. What would you say to them?
I think the first thing I would try to bring people back to, and this is kind of speaking out of my own experience, whereas we had a supreme grand poobah leader and we were to submit to that leader no matter what, and that's it. And coming to the Red Ink Revival and watching this, I go back to the centurion where he's speaking to Jesus and he says this, he says, I too am a man under authority. And so if we can understand, if you've got that, it's just, I'm done, I've tried everything, you need to check yourself. Jesus was under the authority of a father, the Father. And that Father, because of Jesus' understanding of that nurturing, loving relationship, he was able to walk in that relationship to strength and productiveness based on that relationship. And Red Ink is so much more than leadership. It is absolutely leadership. It's absolutely going to strengthen your leadership. But what Red Ink is, and under your leadership, Patrick, Red Ink is fatherhood. There are lots of leaders, but very few fathers. And what I would say to a leader that's really struggling, really pray about coming under that father influence that Red Ink and Patrick provides, that nurturing relationship. Don't follow me because I'm in authority. Follow me because I'm a real father, and I'm going to bring you into a nurturing relationship that's going to cause repair and healing and a real sense of, hey, you know what? There is value in me, and I have lots to offer. And it comes from that father relationship. So really ask yourself, where are your relationships? Do you honestly have a father relationship in your life that will nurture who you are and where you are now at this moment?
Gosh, that is so good, man. How about the rest of you? Anybody else want to weigh in on speaking to somebody who's struggling with futility?
For me, my go-to verse in ministry and Psalm 78:72, where it says, David shepherded the children of Israel by the integrity of his heart and the skill of his hands. And as Steve was talking earlier, we do a lot of the skills stuff. We go to the conferences, we read the books, and so we learn what to do, but we miss that heart of integrity part. And integrity just means whole, as we were talking earlier. And so when you hit this ceiling, or you go as far as you can go, or you think, that's it. And God has provided others to really help us through that. And Patrick, what you guys have done for me at Red Ink, and I think about other guys, other times people get stuck, Martin Luther King and those great guys, they were trying to bring about change, they prayed, they fasted, but they were stuck. And in all due respect, it was this guy, Gandhi, and his nonviolent, principle that they adhered to. And so they went outside of their group or what they were familiar with. And that's the power of others. And they took that, implemented. And so, boom, they were able to break through. I was watching CNBC one day, and Ford was the same thing. They were stuck. Finally, after I don't know how many years, they went outside of the Ford family and the Ford network and hired the guy from Boeing. Next thing you know, when the big economic thing hit and Detroit was needing money, General Motors and Chrysler, they went to D.C., with needing a bailout. Well, Ford was doing great. And so really getting outside, it is really important, and finding somebody that's not like you. And, there's limits when you stay within your tribe. And so going back to what Aaron was saying, is what has been provided here is a fresh new way of looking at things. And so if you find yourself stuck and just disappointed, stop doing what's not working. It's time to get into a new network. It's time to get something fresh, man. And it's okay to be uncomfortable and be vulnerable. There's so much upside to it. And so the very thing you say you're seeking and that you desire, here it is. Here's this opportunity. And so it's just a matter of getting out of the ruts. I love what John said about the ruts,
That's a great analogy.
And blaze a new path with some people that are seeing things differently, and it's an awesome experience. Jesus said he came that we might have life and have it more abundantly. So if it's not happening, and that was his intention, I got to really look within to see why I'm going without, and that's what Red Ink has been for me. This is such a refresher, it's such an encourager. I'm more energetic and pumped about the future than I've ever been, like Steve was saying earlier. And I'm jazzed and good to go. So anybody with that despair, futility, it doesn't have to be that way. That wasn't God's intention for us. So let's look at what he's provided. And so I think that's what Red Ink is. I know that's what Red Ink is for me.
That's such a great word, man. Well, if you guys were to talk to a young leader, so now we're moving beyond, all of us have a lot of years in ministry. We're all, beyond our early 30s and 20s. If we were now at the age we are with the experience we have, going to look back and encourage a young leader to build a healthy foundation for a great life in ministry, what would you say to them? What would you give them as a high level importance? Steve, you want to go?
Sure. I would say know yourself. Before you set off on the grand journey, the mandate that God has given you, you need to know yourself. Know why you're passionate about what you're passionate about. Know why you have the limitations that you have. Because some are right and some are wrong, some are good and some are bad. The best thing you could do would be to invest in yourself first and discover who you are, why you're wired the way that you are, so that as you move forward on the strongest foundation personally that you can. The greatest investment you should make at the beginning, I think, is to invest in yourself. I wish someone had given me the liberty to do that. Instead, I wanted to invest in everybody else. If I could rewind 20 years of ministry and do this first, I would do this. And I think that in every seminary, every ministry school, every church planting organization ought to begin with a reading Bible where you invest in yourself and understand who you are, so that as you move forward, man, you go with a strength and a foundation that's just unshakable.
I love it. I so resonate with that. I wish if I could go back and talk to my younger self, that's what I would say. If there was something like Red Ink Revival, if I could go, that's why I'm so, passionate. I'm so energized and joyful about what we get to do, because I look at the young me and I think, what could my life have been in those years had I had this from the beginning? So if you guys, Aaron, if you were to look at your younger self and coach yourself, up and say at the very beginning, if you could today be the mature, experienced person you are, and you're speaking to the young Aaron, what would you say to Aaron?
Oh, it's in a heartbeat. I would say this, because when I was moving into it, I was doing some things in the entertainment industry, and I felt like with my personality, with my charisma, all those things, that I could go in and win any group of people. And what I would say to myself is, you have very little to do with success or failure. And if you could go back and say, listen, it has your talent, your ability, your know-how, your biblical knowledge is a microcosm. It's bringing you success. It has nothing to do with any of that, and everything to do with your health. It has zero to do with your personality, zero to do with your charisma, zero to do with your know-how, and everything to do with your health. And you've got to ask yourself, am I truly healthy? If I peeled back everything that I am and showed everybody what I really am, what's that going to do to me? Yeah. What's that going to do to me personally? And that's what I'd tell a young Aaron is, hey man, you need to get yourself right and get yourself healthy, because all of those other things are always going to be there because they were given to you by God. And so what you got to do is you've got to go in there and heal all this brokenness so that you can effectively, out of love, use those talents, abilities, and natural gifts to their best and what God wanted them to be. See, that's why Jesus was so perfect and did everything right, is because he was 100% healthy. He was 100% connected to his Father, and he had no brokenness. And so we're trying to strong arm it with our talents, our abilities, and our charisma, and that's just a recipe for failure in the inner self, and failure ultimately, no matter how successful you are, you'll always feel like a failure because you're broken on the inside. So that's what I tell the young Aaron is, look, you have very little to do with success or failure. Yeah. It's all about your health. And if you'll get healthy, then all of those things will naturally happen.
That is so good. Out of the abundance of the heart, we know the mouth speaks, and Proverbs tells us to guard the heart because out of it flows all the issues of life. So the true gifts of who you are come from a whole heart. They don't come from striving or hyper-performing. That is so good. I love it, Aaron. Well, guys, let's kind of find the landing strip here. Are there any kind of last words, final thoughts that any of you would want to give?
Yeah, for me, my thought is this. The parable of the talents really stands out to me. And Jesus gave one 5, another one 2, another one 1, and he's telling this story, and then there was this time for reconciliation. And so, of course, you guys know the story. The 5 turned his into 10, the 2 into 4, but the 1 hid his and didn't do anything with it, and the Lord called him wicked and lazy. And I know we're all going to be held accountable, so it's no longer just doing ministry. I'm thinking about when I have to stand before him. And how can I take my 5 and turn it into 10, or my 2 into 4, whatever it is I've been given? I don't know if I'm a 2, 5, 7, 12, whatever. The fact is, I got to take that and multiply it. And so if I don't know me, and if I don't know me, I can't manage me, and it's going to hinder my level of fruitfulness. And I don't want to come up short with the Lord because I was afraid to have someone look at my heart or to help me to get over my issues. And so I would encourage everyone, now is the time to, if you're a person of faith, to release your faith, trust God. It's not by accident that you've come across this podcast. And really, really, in order to really be about your Father's business, as Aaron was saying earlier, we have got to be healthy. We've got to be healthy. So I would just encourage people, if you're a real leader and you really want to lead with ultimate effectiveness, you got to get healthy. So that's my admonition. That's my encouragement.
That is such good encouragement. John, I think you were about to say something.
I just want to tag on to what Aaron mentioned earlier too, about your guys having such a spirit of the Father, because there's so many people you can follow, but you really learn over time that your ceiling is going to always be their floor, because they don't really want you to succeed past the level they're at. But you guys are literally building a stage for us to stand on. And that's the heart of a father, that we want the next generation to go further than we ever dreamed of.
Yeah.
And that's what we all needed all along. And that's what you guys are doing. And that's what you guys are going to create in us, is God restoring the hearts of the Father again, so that we can see this next generation just do crazy, amazing things for God.
Thank you. Thank you for highlighting that. It's so sweet to my soul, because I have two spiritual fathers that were all both from a distance. I call them spiritual fathers because they've impacted my thinking more than anybody else. But the times I was around them, I had, group dinners, and sometimes there'd be closer, more affectionate times, but not much. And I really have felt the whole of not having a father. I've talked to the Lord about it over the years of, God, it would have been so amazing if somebody who was thoughtful, somebody who could love me and not compete with me and not feel like that I was a threat to them, could actually breathe love into me. And then if I were to do something like I did early on to start our church, actually the guy that I was a part of his church, and he had a pastoral role in my life, and I loved him, and he was very helpful to me in so many ways. But when I got ready to start our church, he again was one of them that thought I was moving towards heresy. He even would say things like, are you going to have an open collar shirt and not wear a tie and coat on Sunday mornings? And I said, well, I would just like to know that you would support me and love me, even if that were true. My heart just longed for somebody to say to me, hey, I believe in you. And if you make a mistake, we're going to walk it out together. And if you really show that this thing is valuable and important, then, we'll all celebrate it and say, let's all take our ties off. But instead, he made the comment, you're an idiot if you do that. Well, that immediately made you not feel safe. And incidentally, it's kind of funny because that same person who I just want nothing but blessing for him, but I saw him on social media at a preaching event with no tie on. I wanted to send a text and said, you're an idiot, but I didn't. And I really don't mean that with the edge that feels like. It just, I get power out of being able to put it back in their face. But it was just the best that they knew at the time. I want a father. That's what I have wanted. And so for some of you guys to feel that, that I in any way could add value to your life, I truly do get more blessing out of watching you guys become whole and returning to carrying the vision. It's so cool to watch people who are invested in multiply the investment. I do get more joy out of that than actually what I even get to do. So we're on a journey together, guys. And my heart, in fact, we were talking, Dr. Todd Bowman and I this week, about plans and modeling what we're going to do to be able to reach more people. And a big part of that is to anybody who desires to be trained in what we would call maybe certified, so that you feel equipped. The certification is not just a vetting process. It's really about giving somebody a milestone that they could be equipped to not only do it in their church, but all of you guys have such a network of friends in ministry that are hurting. And wow, what an amazing idea to think that we all could make a difference in just one person's life. And what if it were 2 and 5 and 10 each? So I'm just so grateful to have you guys in my life. Thank you for coming on today and sharing what you're learning in leadership. I know our listeners are going to be absolutely blown away by you all. I know I am, and I have actually heard and seen so much of your stories. So again, thank you guys for being a part of the Red Ink Revival Leadership Podcast today.
Well, thank you for joining us today. I want to encourage you that you are enough to lead in this unprecedented time. God's called you, He's anointed you to bring innovative solutions to the novel problems that we're facing. We at Red Ink Revival are praying for you to rise and have a revival in your heart and soul. You might be wondering, well, what's next? I want to encourage you to go to our website at redinkrevival.com. There you're going to find some resources, retreat opportunities, upcoming special events, and a growing bank of content. Also, we are about to offer Facebook Lives and webinars that you're going to want to know about. And so sign up for our free e-newsletter so you can stay abreast of all that is available in the growing content we're giving. Also, we're still planning to host our retreats throughout the year. I want to encourage any pastor and their spouses, the church leaders in any marketplace environment to let us know of your interest. Go check out it at the website, because we believe one of these retreats will make a life-changing impact on you and your spouse and the dreams you have in your heart. The dates and more info, again, is at redinkrevival.com. Everything we are building is to resource you to be a wholehearted leader. I'd love for you to be a part of our Red Ink tribe. I can't wait till our next episode, and I'm glad that you were here with us today. We'll see you next time.